Hello and welcome to the Ellen Made Book Club. Today we have a book club session and we're talking about Parable of the Sower by Octavia E Butler, 1984 by George Orwell, and A Man Called Ove by Fredrik Backman. And I have a feeling this is going to be a long video, so I hope you have something to drink, some snacks, get yourself cozy, and let's get into talking about these books. Before every book club video, I put up a post on my community tab where you can enter your questions or any requests for topics that you want me to discuss in the video. And this time you had so many great questions and topics, so the majority of this video is going to be based off of those. Thank you so much to everyone who participated and asked their questions. I really appreciate it, and I think that makes it a lot more fun to do these book club videos when it's like, a bit more interactive. I also want to mention again that this video may contain spoilers for all of these three books. I'm kind of assuming that you have read the book or won't read the book if you're watching this video. So that way I don't have to spell things out because I'm assuming that you have already read the book and know what I'm talking about. But it also means that I might talk about things that someone who hasn't read the book is not yet aware of. So you have been warned, there may be spoilers, but you're very welcome to watch if you choose to. So let's start with Parable of the Sower by Octavia E Butler. This is a dystopian novel written in 1993, I think, and it's set in 2024 and the coming years. In this book, we follow Lauren, who is a Black teenage girl living in Los Angeles, and she writes this book as her journal, so it's structured like diary entries. And she lives in a gated community with her family, where there's a wall around their neighborhood, keeping out the poor and desperate and criminal people. There's a lot of homelessness and unemployment. Cost of living is very high. You have to pay for water, it's really expensive, gas is very expensive, and cars are not being used anymore. The very rich have security, but everyone else is kind of left to their own devices. No one trusts the police or the fire department. Everything is very corrupt and unsafe. There's also a drug going around that makes people want to set things on fire, which is horrifying. So the society has basically collapsed, and Lauren is contemplating what's going to happen and how she can prepare herself to survive whatever happens. Her father is a pastor, but she doesn't really believe in that religion, so she is developing her own. And then one day this gated community is crashed and she has to run and leave everything behind. Lauren also has hyper empathy, meaning she feels other people's physical pain. So they start walking north, and more people sort of follow along, and Lauren has this vision of trying to bring them together with this new religion that she has, and then they have some sort of plan on self-sufficiency. And yeah, that's pretty much the story. I've been thinking a lot about this book, and I didn't love it. I know so many other people do, and I've been thinking about why I didn't love it and why other people might, and I immediately go to I'm the problem. It's my fault. I think my expectations might have been too high, or I was just expecting something different, but at the same time I feel like this is kind of what I expected. I just wanted more from the story. I expected race to be an issue, which it kind of is, but it's also not very deeply explored. It's like it's mentioned, and it's mentioned that that might be a bit of a problem, but it's not taking to an extreme in any way. I also expected it to be about this religion, which it is, but again, I expected more. I think I thought that I was going to be persuaded or be drawn into this new religion, and that it would work the way cults usually do. Like how everything sounds very good at first, and so you're like, yes, nodding along, and like all of this is true and feels right to me, and it makes sense and it sounds good. And so I wanted to believe this new religion, and then sort of feel myself getting tricked or realizing that I had been sucked into this new religion. And I didn't feel that way. I felt that the religion part was kind of thin, the self-sufficiency and like loving Earth and change being the only constant and all of that. Yeah, absolutely. But then there was like talk about moving to space, and that just threw me off completely. There was nothing for me to really connect to in that religion. And so, yeah, I guess I was disappointed in that as well. And then the hyper empathy thing was news to me. I didn't know that that was going to be a part of the story. And I found that interesting. And at the start, I could relate to that as like an empathetic person. I'm the kind of person who gets very affected by other people's misery and pain, and I empathize a lot with other people who are going through hard things. But like the more the story went along, I felt like that's not empathy that she has, it's just a physical reaction. Like she feels other people's physical pain. It's not like she sees other people being so sad and then being saddened by it. Maybe that was an aspect of it as well, but I didn't feel like that was explored deeply enough, or I don't know, I didn't see the point of that being there. It felt like a gimmick almost, and like I didn't see the point of it. I guess it was a secret that she had to carry, and then she had to show trust in her companions and share that secret with them and show herself vulnerable to them, and so that builds trust between them, I guess, and that might have strengthened their willingness to believe in her and her new religion, because they felt that they had to care for her for that. But then I also thought that it would have made more sense if that was like a gift from God or whatever, and that was like something that singled her out, but she wasn't the only one with this hyper empathy, so I didn't like, what was that for? It could have played a much bigger part in the story or not been there at all, but the way it was now was some kind of in between, and I just didn't see the point of it. I'm very curious to know if you had a different take on that, and like if you saw a deeper meaning that I missed, or if you interpreted it differently. I would love to hear about that, because like I said, I didn't really get it, maybe, I don't know. I've also been thinking that maybe I'm just comparing this novel to newer and shinier things. Like there's been so many good like TV shows and everything lately, or like in recent years, and movies and everything. So maybe something that was written in the 90s isn't going to be as mind-blowing as it might have been if I had read it then. But even then, I think that these things would have been lacking for me a little bit, like the religion not being explored deeply enough. And I also felt that the characters weren't like fleshed out enough. I found myself like forgetting who was who a little bit, and what their backstory was, and how they came into the group, and what their issue was. And they were just kind of names. They didn't really have very fleshed out characteristics, and I don't think Lauren really had that either, apart from being this like new prophet and thinking about her religion and really being determined to make that a thing. Yeah, there were a lot of things that didn't really work for me. I saw someone talk about how this book was eye-opening for them, and like in terms of comparing it to how society is today, and that this book sort of was shining a light on the problems that we see today. And like I can appreciate it for that as well, and if that's the effect that it has on people, that's great. But for me, I feel like there wasn't anything new. Like I feel like my eyes were already open to that kind of thing, I guess. I'm also not like judging this book based on Butler's ability to predict the future. Like that's not that's not what I base my opinion on about the book. Like, I want a good story, I want characters that I can connect to, and I want the world to feel believable. And I guess it did to a certain extent, but then this whole like hyper empathy and the moving to space and the painted people, that just felt a little bit too out there. I think it would have been a stronger book, in my humble opinion, if it had been more about like the climate issue and the economic crisis and just people trying to survive in the gated communities and how people treat each other and, you know, not trusting in the police and everything. I think that would have been sufficient to make a really interesting story, and I think it could have been explored more deeply. And even the like religion and cult aspect of the story could also have been incorporated into that and explored more deeply. And I just feel like the other things sort of took away from the social issues that I find interesting. Maybe it's the sci-fi elements that are throwing me off and that I just don't see as necessary. Maybe I just want the misery in a real way and without the sci-fi gimmicks. I don't know, maybe that's what it is. So let's get to the first question from one of you, and that one is from Nana. I hope I'm saying that right. I asked what her name was because the channel handle is na_na_na7346. And also, is there a specific melody in mind for this channel handle? And she said that it makes her smile when people have a melody in mind, so she would like to hear what I hear when I read her handle. So I have 2 melodies in mind, and I can't think of what these songs are called, but the melodies that I hear are either na 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 hey no no no. That's the first one. Yeah, the second one has one na too many, I think, but it's na 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 na. Okay, that's all you're gonna get. Anyway, Nana's question was, thematically, this spirals a lot around religion. Are you religious yourself? And whatever the answer, do you think that had an influence in how you approached and or liked the book? I think this is a fantastic question, and I definitely think that it has an influence on how I approached the book, and maybe how much I liked it as well. I'm not religious. I'm not a complete atheist. I'm spiritual, and I'm open-minded to there being some kind of whatever. I'm raised in a pretty secular Christian but secular society and family, so I celebrate Christian holidays and all of that, but in a pretty secular way. It's more about Santa than Jesus, I guess. But that being said, I do find religion as a topic very interesting. I see how important it is to people, and I'm very interested in religion from like a psychological and social perspective, and I see how much it brings strength and comfort and community to people, and how it brings people together to do amazing things for each other, and I think that's awesome. And I also see the flip side of religion when it's being misused for other purposes like war and violence and persecution, and it can be such a powerful tool to control and manipulate people in society and in politics. And yeah, so I find it really interesting as a topic, but I'm not religious myself. And that was probably one of the reasons why I wanted to read this book at all, because it had that aspect. And I didn't know exactly how religion was going to be a part of this book, like I mentioned, but I did have some sense of it being an aspect of the story, and so that intrigued me. And I was expecting it to be more persuasive and sort of make me fall for this religion and believe in something and like nod along and then realize that I had been lulled into this cult. I think that would have been a very strong thing for a book to be able to do. And maybe that's a bigger part in the second book in this duology, Parable of the Talents, which I'm very intrigued to read. maybe I'll be disappointed again because it's not that big of a thing in that book. I don't know, but I'm very curious to find out. I have watched quite a bit of like documentaries about cults and fundamentalists and how groups like that are formed and like constructed, and after a while you start seeing the patterns of it, and how in the beginning everything sounds so good and it's like basic truths that no one is gonna object to, and then slowly over time this thing develops and evolves and turns into something that basically just benefits the prophet, who starts getting a bit power hungry and starts abusing people and, you know, changes the rules as he usually goes along. And there's usually a certain terminology being developed and like a specific language and symbols and all of that kind of thing that brings a group together. And I didn't really see that in Parable of the Sower, so I think that's part of what made it less strong. There's the term earth seed, so that's like one term, but other than that, there wasn't really, you know, words for things that were specific to that religion. So yeah, I think I wanted to be either more persuaded and like lulled into it, or see those elements of a new religion starting being used. I don't know, maybe I was expecting too much of Butler to like invent this whole new religion that I was gonna believe in suddenly. But yeah, I didn't feel into it from the beginning at all. So yeah, that was a little bit of a disappointment. I would be very curious to know if you had a different experience from mine or the same one, and if you're willing to share whether you're religious or not. And I hope that everybody can be respectful to one another, obviously, to everybody's different sets of beliefs. I would love to know if it affected your reading experience of this book. And yeah, please share any thoughts that you might have had on that. I would love to know. So in conclusion, I didn't think that this was a bad book by any means. I did feel sad and mad and like the energy was drained out of me. I felt something reading it. I was saddened by how society treats people and how that makes people treat each other badly, and like the moral decline where everybody is just fighting for their own survival and taking drugs to cope with an unbearable situation, and stealing from each other, and so on and so on. There were horrible things being done to people in this story, and it's not that I wasn't affected by that at all. I just wish that the story would have been more compelling to me, or done in a different way, with like deeper exploration of the religion and the social issues and how people were struggling to survive in a more realistic maybe world, without the sci-fi gimmicks, if that's what they are. I feel like I can't really judge this book. I feel like I read half a book and I want to read the other half to be able to have an opinion on it as a complete set. And yeah, I'm looking forward, well, maybe not really looking forward, but I definitely want to read the second part in this duology. And I'm going to read that with Kat and Chelsea from Curious Cat and Libraries and Lattes. I would also like to read Kindred by Octavia E Butler, but probably not anytime soon. I think I need a break from dystopias. And on that note, let's move on to 1984 by George Orwell. This is another dystopian novel. It was first published in 1949, and it describes society in 1984 or somewhere around there. In this we follow Winston, who works at the Ministry of Truth, and he works for the party, which is led by Big Brother, and Big Brother has very strict rules and sees and hears everything that you do, which is very unnerving, obviously. Winston works with rewriting history to fit the current political narrative. So he changes old newspapers to match what is being said at the present moment. And then he also meets Julia, who also works for the party. And they are both a bit rebellious, and they start a relationship and talk about how to move forward with their rebellion. I didn't love it. I know it's some people's like favorite book and they read it over and over again. I'm not gonna reread this ever again, I don't think. I felt like crap the whole time reading it, and I'm assuming that's kind of the point. But it was not an enjoyable experience for me. And yeah, while I can see the social commentary and appreciate that, and appreciate that this is a good work of literature, it's not something that I enjoyed at all. I thought the first half of the book was pretty boring, to be honest. Like, nothing happens in the first 150 pages. It's just descriptions of society and day-to-day life, which I understand is important, but I would have liked to see a little bit more plot, I think. I think they get a room about page 150, and so like until that point nothing has really happened. I also wasn't really like mind blown. I kept being told that this is gonna blow your mind, and I'm not really, maybe I knew too much about it already, and so the things that I read was not like a surprise to me. And again, I'm not like judging a book based on its ability to predict the future. I feel like this was more of a commentary of the past, or like World War II and maybe the Cold War, and just that those things were not new, and I feel like the technology was also in the works. I did have a basic understanding of what this book was about. Like, I've studied political science before, and I've been to school, and this book has been talked about. And even though I've never read it before, I knew of the basic premise of like surveillance and not having any privacy and being in a very controlled environment. And obviously that's not a good thing or a nice experience for anybody. But I wasn't like surprised or mind blown by that. And I also feel like if you tell someone that their mind is going to be blown, it's not going to be, because that's like letting the air out of a balloon just very, very slowly. So there's never going to be a pop. But you guys had a lot of questions about this book, and I'm so grateful for all of your questions. And the rest of this section is going to be based off of them. So let's start with the first few questions that are from RD at RD's Library. So thank you so much for all of your questions. The first one is, did the depressing nature of the story affect your mood? And I would say that it definitely did. And like, that's the part I can appreciate. I can appreciate that dystopia that really makes you feel bad is well crafted. Like, that's a sign of a good book, that it makes you feel something, whatever it is. And I was definitely not feeling very hopeful about the world or humanity while reading this book, and after reading this book, and especially not having read Parable of the Sower right before reading this. I'm not sure that was a great choice for my mental well-being, but there we are. Yeah, I was really affected by it, and not in a good way, which I guess says something good about the book, but also not. What scared you most about the book? The parts that scared me the most were the hate, like these 2-minute hate sessions where people just start screaming at whatever is on the screen, like whatever someone tells them to hate, they hate. There's no critical thinking, and there's no room for critical thinking. It's just blind obedience, and that's horrifying to me. Obviously, the rats at the end was also horrifying. I felt myself like almost reading through my fingers, and like I didn't want to see the words on the page. I didn't want to know what was going to happen. That was ugh. and also how the fear for your own safety and the fear for your own survival and the fear of pain can make you betray the people that you love the most. And yeah, no one should ever have to be put in that position ever. And yeah, that was really scary to me. How did the book change your understanding of what it's like to live in countries that have this kind of environment today? I don't think my understanding was changed by it, but it did make a very strong point of like how what it's like to be in that kind of environment where you can't really trust anybody and where people are so manipulated into thinking such violent and aggressive thoughts and are just like so filled with hate and filled with such, again, blind obedience and just accepting things for what they are. There's no room for rational argument and disagreement and like discussion about things. And so then your only option is to obey or like be punished. And that has to be exhausting and absolutely horrible. The next question is from Mimi at It's Mimi Duong. I hope I said that right. Did you find any of Orwell's predictions of what 1984 looks like and the story's propaganda to be surprising in the context of our world today? I wasn't surprised, I wouldn't say. Again, I was being told that I was going to be mind blown by the book, and so I wasn't. But also, like, this was published in 1949, so that's like right after the Second World War, and I feel like there are a lot of elements in this story that are similar to how the Nazis controlled people and manipulated people into doing absolutely horrible things to each other and spreading that kind of hate for no reason, but just like by pure manipulation and fear. And there are also similarities to these fundamentalist groups that, you know, call themselves Christian and want to ban books and ban sex and ban everything that even mentions a body part or love in any way, and claim that it's to protect the children. And I feel like they actually believe it because they've been told that things are horrible, like a book, for example, with something in it that isn't even there, but they just blindly believe it. And so I'm not surprised, I guess, as much as I am horrified that that is still going on today. And like, can we learn, please? Can we like not repeat history over and over? That would be great. There are obviously more parallels than that, but I'm trying to not make this video 50 hours long, so I'm gonna keep it pretty general for that question. But yeah, not surprised, I guess, as much as I am saddened and horrified by the fact that we as humanity won't get better at certain things. How did you feel about Winston blindly following the Brotherhood, even though in parallel it is almost similar to how the party is? And did you feel like it foreshadowed what was going to happen to Winston? Or did you see any foreshadowing in what was going to happen? I really didn't like that part at all. And I think you're right in how that is like pretty much the exact same that the party does. Like asking for that blind obedience and just like be willing to do whatever for some greater good that you're not really sure what it even is. Like that's not critical thinking either. There were horrible things that they were just like, yes, I'm gonna do that. Yes, I'd be willing to do that. Yes, 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 yes. And like the only thing that they didn't want to do was to be apart from each other. And it was just so stupid to me. Like, you're willing to hurt an innocent child for the greater good, but you're not willing to be apart from your partner. That whole thing just seemed so stupid to me. And I guess I understand how that could happen. If you're in that situation, I guess you're grasping at straws, or like you have to have hope in something. And so if there's the slightest hope that there is an organization that is going to defeat this big brother, like, you would want to maybe go further than normal. But yeah, I was like shaking my head while I was reading that part and thinking that this is going to come back to bite them somehow. I didn't foresee exactly what was going to happen, but I figured that all of these yeses were gonna come back to bite them in some way or another, and also that like someone in the story has to be lying or like not be exactly who they say they are. I think I was more surprised at how trusting they were and how trusting Winston was toward them, and was just like, okay, if you say that you're this person, then you probably are, even though he knows he shouldn't trust anybody. I feel like he just kind of gave up and just like, okay, whatever. Gambled his life away, basically. So yeah, that was my experience with that part, and I would love to hear what your experience was. Okay, so lastly, I just have to talk about one thing that annoyed me with this story, and that is the relationship between Winston and Julia. I saw in a review or something somewhere some commentary about this relationship, and they said that it was such a beautiful relationship, and I don't know, I didn't see that at all. Like, it started with her just dropping a note in front of him saying I love you. Like, that was the first thing that happened, was it not? Like, he doesn't know her name. He has seen her and sort of took note of her, and how she looked, and that she was like young and pretty. But other than that, he doesn't know anything about her. And so how much more does she know about him? And like, was that genuine? Like, did she actually love him when she wrote that note? Or was that just what she did to get men into bed? Because that's not the first guy she's been with. So maybe that was just a trick. Like, why would Winston fall for that? And I know he's like questioning it and like not being 100% sure that she's genuine, which was, reasonable. I just didn't really see where the relationship went from there, and like how they came to love each other so intensely, and like they were the only thing that they loved in this life. And I get that you can, if you find something good in that whole society and everything's horrible, like if you find one person that you can relax a little bit with and sort of be yourself with and have a good time, then of course you're going to have very warm feelings toward that person. But I don't know, I didn't really see any depth to their relationship. I don't really know what that was based on. I didn't feel any connection to any of it. It felt pretty superficial to me. And I can understand if it was just like a physical thing and it was, forbidden and all of that. And like I said, they found someone to relax with and have a good time with. And so warm feelings develop. But like, I would not describe this as like this beautiful relationship. I would be very interested to read Julia by Sandra Newman, which is the retelling of 1984 from Julia's perspective. I don't know why I would want to put myself through that. I just said I would never read this book again. But yeah, I'm very curious to know how that is portrayed and like what her perspective could be. Let me know if you are also interested in reading that, and maybe we can do that as another book club read. I would also love to read Wifedom, Mrs. Orwell's Invisible Life by Anna Funder, which is a biography of George Orwell's wife. I think that sounds fascinating. It says that Funder was a huge fan of George Orwell and had read like 6 of his biographies, and then she found out about his forgotten wife, Eileen, who married Orwell in 1936 and who was also a writer herself. And it says that her literary brilliance not only shaped Orwell's work, but her practical common sense saved his life. And so I would love to read that. Anyone else? And then we have one question that is for both 1984 and Parable of the Sower. And that question is from Chelsea at Libraries and Lattes. Thank you so much for your question. Were there any common themes or takeaways for you from 1984 and Parable of the Sower, since they're both dystopian novels written in the 20th century? I think my takeaway is that all the signs are there if you just look at them, and that the problem is that the people who really need to look at them won't. Which is a dystopia in and of itself. I think another takeaway is the importance of teaching and learning history and the danger of censorship. If we don't keep the knowledge about what has already happened alive and like keep reminding ourselves of those things are just going to happen again. And that's really scary. I recently saw a video of a woman who voted for Trump and has since come to regret that. And she was in an evangelical church and she has since left that church. And she was talking about how being a Republican is like a part of their religion. They're being like brainwashed into thinking that the only way to be a good Christian is to be a Republican and vote for whatever Republican candidate they have. And so it's like vote for Trump or go to hell, basically. It's such a cult mentality, and I've been seeing that more and more as well, like Trump and his cult. And I just felt so bad for her, because like if that's what you grow up with and you have no access to other information and no access to critical thinking, like they were obviously subjected to other perspectives and other opinions, but they were just so ingrained with like whatever someone says and whatever their arguments are, this is the truth, and you can never like don't even listen to them. And like that's not what critical thinking is. She finally got out of that by seeing that these things actually don't make sense, but like we can't do any better than what we know. Education and critical thinking is really important. So I guess that's my biggest takeaway. I've also been seeing these like reaction videos to the Holocaust, which that blows my mind. The fact that there are people, grown adult people in this world who are not aware that that happened and like what that entailed, and are just like doing reaction videos about it. Like the only way to prevent those things from happening again is education, learning about history and what has happened before and how that came to happen, and learning to see the signs and the patterns, signs of manipulation, and like seeing what actions and arguments are based in love and acceptance and what arguments and actions are based in fear of something, whether it be God or hell or punishment or, you know, losing a sense of belonging or whatever it might be. If something is based out of fear, it's probably not going to be great, you know, compared to something that is coming from love. So in terms of Parable of the Sower, I think the signs are related to climate change and like cost of living. People are saying all over that the cost of living is really high. When people don't have what they need to survive and to provide for their families, they're going to eventually do things that are not great for other people and for society in general. So in terms of 1984, I think the signs are, the group think and like not being able to think and say what you want, and turning people against each other, which is only ever going to benefit the people in power. And like having these very political groups for children is no, please let children explore. Censorship and banning books is also a really scary sign. And then, of course, the constant surveillance and being watched everywhere, and, you know, people documenting your opinions and all of that. All of that is really scary and not great signs for a good future. I don't know how much of this came from the books themselves or how much is from my own way of thinking and like what I had with me from before. But that's where I see alignment, I guess. These things were not news to me in that sense, but it's very scary to see the worst case scenarios played out, and it's even more scary to see in what ways they correspond to the actual reality. So yeah, lots of fun reading this month. I would love to hear in the comments what your takeaways were and what your general feeling and mood is like after reading 1984 and Parable of the Sower, or either one of them if you have read one. I was really affected by both of them, and not in a good way. I'm glad I've read them, but yeah, now I'm gonna have to read some more happy books for a little while, I think. Feel free to leave your own answers to any of the questions or anything that I've said in this video in the comments, and we can continue discussing there. Thank you so much to everyone who joined in and read a book or two or three, and who asked questions and participated and who are discussing in the comments and all of that. And of course, I have to mention the books that we're reading in August, which is Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller and Pachinko by Minjin Lee. And I think these two are going to be super good and super interesting, and we're going to have lots to talk about these two books as well. And I'm very happy that none of them are dystopian. Yeah, I'm hoping I'm going to have a good time with these. And yeah, I think that is it for this video. I thank you so much for watching, and I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Yeah, okay, Renee, why are you doing this to me?